Impact in 3, 2, 1, mark. Sir, it was a dud. It bounced right off the hull. Again? Fire another one. Sir, they're laughing at us. For the first 2 years of World War II, America's most advanced weapon was a joke, and the Japanese Navy was in on it. January 14th, 1942. The Makassar Strait, off Balikpapan, Borneo. The air inside the USS Seawolf is a foul, 120-degree cocktail of diesel fumes, battery acid, and 70 men's sweat. You can feel the vibration of the engines through the steel deck plates. At the periscope is Lieutenant Commander Frederick Fearless Freddie Warder. His eyes are red-rimmed, stinging from the salt and the strain. For weeks, his boat has been hunting, part of America's desperate, failing effort to stop the Japanese juggernaut rolling over the Philippines and the Dutch East Indies. Now, he has one. Caught in the crosshairs is a large, fat target, a Japanese transport ship, wallowing in the calm sea, likely loaded with troops or supplies for the invasion. It's a perfect shot, a textbook setup. Warder snaps his orders. Down periscope, make ready tubes 1 and 2. The crew moves with practiced, tense silence. The plotting party calculates the target's speed and range. The TDC, the Torpedo Data Computer, a mechanical marvel whirs as it assimilates the data. This is what they trained for. This is the moment America's silent service proves its worth. Final bearing. Mark, set, fire 1. A shudder runs through the Seawolf as 3,000 pounds of steel and high explosives, Mark 14 torpedoes, ejected by a blast of compressed air. Fire 2. Another shudder. The torpedoes are away. In the sonar room, the operator listens intently, hearing the high-pitched whir of the torpedo's propellers racing toward the enemy. Warder and his executive officer stare at the stopwatch. The calculation is precise. 35 knots. Impact in 58 seconds. 55, 56, 57. The entire crew holds its breath. 58, 59, 1 minute. The sonarman looks up, his face a mask of confusion. Sir, I hear torpedoes, still running. Warder yanks the periscope handles. Upscope. He sees the impossible. The transport is still there, untouched. 2 beautiful creamy white bubble trails streak directly under the hull of the Japanese ship and keep going, disappearing into the blue water on the other side. A clean miss? No. The solution was perfect. Warder is furious. He wheels the submarine around, bringing his stern tubes to bear. He'll hit them from the other side. He fires another torpedo. This time, the sonarman reports a sound. A dull, metallic clang. On the periscope, Warder sees a small, insignificant splash of water against the transport's hull. The warhead. A 668-pound charge of Torpex. It hit, and it did nothing. It was a dud. Aboard the Japanese ship, sailors and soldiers rush to the rail. They look down at the American submarine, now exposed. Its attack a complete, humiliating failure. They point. They laugh. The transport, unharmed, begins to pick up steam and sails away. Fearless Freddie Warder is one of the first, but he will not be the last. All across the Pacific, this exact scene is playing out, over and over. American submarines, the tip of the spear against the Japanese Empire, are firing ghost torpedoes. This weapon, the Mark 14 torpedo, was supposed to be a miracle of naval engineering, developed in the 1,930 seconds by the U.S. Navy's Bureau of Ordnance, known as BUORD. It was America's primary submarine weapon. It cost $10,000 apiece, the price of a small house, and it was built around a revolutionary, top-secret piece of technology, the Mark 6 magnetic exploder. Unlike older torpedoes that had to physically hit the side of a ship, the Mark 6 was designed to detect the magnetic field of a steel hull. It would detonate underneath the keel, where there was no armor. The resulting gas bubble would break the ship's back, sinking it with a single, devastating blow. It was, on paper, the most advanced torpedo in the world. There was just one problem. It was a catastrophic, unmitigated failure. BUORD, in its infinite wisdom and crippling peacetime arrogance, had rushed the Mark 14 into production without proper testing. To save money, they never fired a single live torpedo with a warhead. To maintain secrecy, they classified the Mark 6 exploder so heavily that even the submarine skippers using it barely understood how it worked. When Freddie Warder and other commanders filed their after-action reports, the response from Washington was ice cold. It wasn't the torpedo's fault, it was skipper error. The admirals at Bureau of Ordnance insisted their wonder weapon was perfect. The sub-commanders, they claimed, were just bad shots. They were firing from too far away. They were miscalculating the enemy's speed. Or, worst of all, they were losing their nerve in combat. For the men on the front lines, risking their lives in steel tubes, hundreds of feet beneath the waves, it was a sickening betrayal. They knew what they saw. They knew their calculations were correct. And they knew the sound of a dud hitting a hull. The weapon they were given to fight with was a lie. And as 1942 dragged on, the Japanese Navy, noticing the harmless thuds and inexplicable misses, began to laugh. April 9th, 1943, off the coast of Guam. The periscope of the USS Tunney cuts a ghostly feather through the flat, moonlit water. In the eyepiece is Commander John A. Scott. His heart is hammering against his ribs. This isn't just a transport. This is the jackpot. A full task force. 3 Shokaku-class aircraft carriers, the same class that attacked Pearl Harbor and their destroyer escorts. It's an ambush fleet admirals dream of. Scott has maneuvered the Tunney inside the destroyer screen, a feat of breathtaking, suicidal bravery. He is so close, he can see the silhouettes of the planes on the flight decks. He has 10 torpedoes ready. He begins to fire. Fire 5, fire 6. One after another, the Mark 14 seconds leap from their tubes. Scott and his crew count the seconds, listening for the war-ending crack of a carrier's spine breaking. Instead, they hear a series of sickening, metallic bongs and thuds. Through the periscope, Scott watches in horror. His torpedoes, fired from point-blank range, are bouncing off the carrier's hulls. They are duds, all of them. One carrier is damaged, but not sunk. Another is completely unharmed. The Japanese destroyers, alerted by the impacts, are turning, their searchlights cutting through the dark. The Tunney is forced to crash dive, enduring a horrific depth charging for a kill that never happened. Commander Scott's patrol report is blistering. He writes that his torpedoes are as worthless as a congressional investigation. He is not alone. By 1943, the silent service is in a state of open revolt. The statistics are damning. Submariners are firing 8, 10, sometimes 12 torpedoes just to sink one small freighter. Japanese merchant sailors, who once jumped overboard at the first sign of a torpedo track, now reportedly stay on deck, watching the American fish explode harmlessly in their wake or clang uselessly against their hulls. They call them duds and laugh. The problem is the Bureau of Ordnance. BUORD is a small, insular, and incredibly arrogant fraternity of officers back in Washington, D.C. To them, the Mark 14 torpedo and its Mark 6 magnetic exploder are the pinnacle of naval science. They've seen the blueprints. They've run the workshop tests. They know it works. When commanders like Scott or Warder file their complaints, BUORD's response is a bureaucratic stone wall. The torpedo is perfect. The failure, they insist, must be with the men. They claim the skippers are firing from too far out, that they are misestimating target speed, that they are shooting from the hip under pressure. It's a vicious insult to men enduring conditions and stress that the admirals in D.C. cannot even imagine. But in July 1942, a new man arrives at Pearl Harbor, Rear Admiral Charles A. Lockwood. Lockwood is not a D.C. desk admiral. He is a career submariner, gruff, practical, and fiercely loyal to his boys. He has spent his life in these pig boats, and he knows his skippers are not cowards or incompetents. When legendary commanders like Dudley "Mush" Morton of the USS Wahoo return to port, their faces etched with fatigue and fury, and tell Lockwood the torpedoes are running deep, Lockwood believes them. This is the first clue. The skippers are convinced the torpedoes are not just duding, they are running deeper than the depth they are set for. If set for 10 feet, they run at 20, passing harmlessly under the target. This would explain Freddie Warder's perfect miss back in 1942. Board's response? Impossible. The depth mechanism is flawless. Lockwood decides to find out for himself. In June 1943, he flies to Albany, Australia, and orders a test that Board had forbidden. He has the submarine USS Muskellunge fire a spread of Mark 1-4, with their warheads removed at a large fishing net strung between two cliffs in a quiet bay. The torpedoes are set to run at a depth of 10 feet. Lockwood and his staff watch from a boat. The torpedoes are fired. They see the white bubble tracks speed toward the net. And then they watch, with dawning horror, as every single torpedo track disappears under the net's bottom line. They aren't just deep, they are wildly deep. They retrieve the torpedoes and find the evidence. The torpedoes didn't hit the 10-foot net. They ripped through it at an average depth of 25 feet. The mystery is solved in an instant. The Mark 14 was designed for a peacetime speed of 35 knots, but in combat it was fired at its high-speed setting of 46 knots. No one at board had ever tested the depth sensor at combat speed. The increased water pressure from the higher velocity was forcing the torpedo's control surfaces to drive it deeper. Lockwood is vindicated, and he is furious. He sends a blistering message to all his submarines in the Pacific. He doesn't wait for board's permission. He issues a direct order: set all torpedoes to run at 0 depth. He tells them to aim for the waterline. It's a field fix, a direct violation of protocol, and it works. Almost immediately, the running deep problem vanishes. The torpedoes start hitting their targets, and that's when the second Flaw, the Mark 6 magnetic exploder, reveals its catastrophic ship-losing secret. July 24th, 1943, the Caroline Islands. Commander Lawson, Dan Daspit of the USS Tinosa, is staring at a ghost. He's just fired 2 Mark 14 seconds at the largest Japanese tanker he has ever seen, the Tonan Maru No. 3, a 19,000-ton whale factory ship converted to carry precious oil for the Imperial fleet. It's a target that could shorten the war. Both torpedoes, set to 0 depth as per Lockwood's order, have hit the tanker dead on, and both have been duds. A puff of smoke, a spray of water, and nothing. The tanker is stopped, dead in the water, but it is not sinking. Daspit is a calm, methodical man. This is not a rushed snapshot. It's a laboratory experiment. The sea is flat. The target is a barn door. He reloads. Make ready tube 3. He moves the Tinosa closer. 875 yards. You can't miss. Fire 3. The torpedo hits. Clang. It's another dud. The crew in the conning tower is silent, their knuckles white. This is maddening. Daspit, determined to sink this ship, begins a clinical, terrifying dissection of the Mark 14's failures. He fires a 4th torpedo. It hits. It's a dud. He fires a 5th, a 6th, a 7th. Thud, thud, thud. The Japanese sailors on the Tonan Maru, at first terrified, are now just watching. The Tinosa is surfacing, recharging its batteries, circling them like a shark with rubber teeth. Daspit is losing his mind. He has fired 9 torpedoes at a stationary target, and all 9 have failed to explode. He checks his equipment. He recalculates his solutions. Everything is perfect. It must be the torpedoes. This is the moment the true, horrifying scale of the failure is laid bare. By fixing the depth problem, Lockwood had inadvertently exposed the next 2 flaws. Flaw #2, the Mark 6 magnetic exploder, the wonder weapon, was too sensitive. Designed in the gentle magnetic fields of New England, it was now being used in the tropics. The Earth's magnetic field near the equator was different, stronger, and was setting the torpedoes off prematurely, exploding them harmlessly in the water before they even reached the target. This explained the premature explosions that skippers had been reporting for months. Flaw #3, the Mark 14 contact exploder. This was the fail-safe, the simple, hit the ship and go bang firing pin. But board, in their obsession with the high-tech magnetic exploder, had built a contact pin that was fatally flawed. It was made of relatively weak metal. When the torpedo hit a ship's hull, especially at a perfect 90-degree angle, the firing pin would crumple and deform on impact before it could strike the detonator. The torpedo was literally crushing itself into a dud. Back on the Tynosa, Dan Daspit is down to his last few torpedoes. He orders his men to try something desperate. He tells them to fire at an angle, hoping a glancing blow won't crush the pin. He fires his 10th torpedo. A hit, but another dud. He fires his 11th. It hits at a sharp angle. K.A. hump. A massive explosion. The contact pin worked. The tanker is wounded, but Daspit has only fired one successful torpedo out of 11. He fires his 12th. Another dud. He has just 2 torpedoes left. He gives up. The Tonan Maru, indestructible, limps away. Daspit, in a fit of brilliance and rage, saves his final torpedo. He doesn't fire it. He orders his crew to keep it, to take it back to Pearl Harbor. He is going to hand-deliver the evidence to Admiral Lockwood. When the Tynosa docks, its crew is exhausted and humiliated. Daspit walks straight to Lockwood's office and lays the unfired Mark 14 on his desk, figuratively speaking. His patrol report is a masterpiece of controlled fury. It details every shot, every angle, every thud. This is the smoking gun Lockwood has been waiting for. The dud is no longer a rumor. It's not skipper error. It's a 9 out of 1 failure rate, documented by a trusted commander, with a torpedo to prove it. Lockwood, his patience for Washington's bureaucracy at its end, decides to settle the matter once and for all. He's going to find out what's wrong with the contact exploder, even if he has to break every rule in the Bureau book to do it. August 31st, 1943, Pearl Harbor Submarine Base. Admiral Lockwood is holding the Tynosa's patrol report, and his rage is radiating through the concrete walls of his office. 9 duds. A 19,000-ton tanker, a war-changing target, allowed to escape because of $10,000 apiece. Junk. The Bureau of Ordnance, even after the depth flaw was proven, is still insisting their contact exploder is perfect. Their latest theory? The Tynosa's crew must have handled the torpedoes improperly during loading. Lockwood has had enough. If Washington won't test the torpedo, he will. He summons one of his most trusted, innovative, and stubborn officers, Lieutenant Commander Charles Swede Momsen. Momsen is a legend, the inventor of the Momsen lung, a device for escaping sunken submarines. He's a man who understands pressure, and he hates bureaucracy as much as Lockwood. Lockwood gives him a simple, unprecedented order. Swede, I want you to find out why those damn things don't explode. Momsen knows a sea trial is too risky and time-consuming. He needs to replicate the Tynosa's 90-degree, perfect hit. He needs a laboratory. So, he builds one. His men find a sheer cliff face on the Hawaiian island of Kahula, overlooking the ocean. They muscle a 90-foot crane to the edge. Then, they begin hoisting fully armed, live Mark 14 torpedo swarshots, not practice dummies into the air. Below them, they place a massive, 3-inch thick steel plate, salvaged from a Japanese ship, to simulate a tanker's hull. It is a terrifying, brutally simple, and completely unauthorized experiment. The first torpedo is hauled up 90 feet, the height calculated to match the 46-knot impact speed of a torpedo in the water. The area is cleared. Momsen gives the signal. Drop it. The 3,000-pound torpedo plummets. It strikes the steel plate perfectly, at a dead-on 90-degree angle. Thud. The sound is sickening. A dull, metallic smack that echoes across the water. There is no explosion. The torpedo's warhead, filled with 668 pounds of high-explosive torpex, is completely intact. It just bounces. The team, hearts in their throats, moves in. They carefully disarm the torpedo and cut it open. Inside, they find the proof. The firing pin, the small, nail-like piece of metal designed to strike the detonator, is a mangled, crumpled piece of slag. It had hit the steel plate with so much force that it bent and deformed, completely failing to travel the last fraction of an inch needed to set off the charge. It was exactly as Daspit had suspected. The perfect shot, was the only shot guaranteed to fail. Mommsen and his men are grimly triumphant. They drop another. Thud. Another dud. They begin modifying the pins, trying to strengthen them. But Lockwood, seeing the reports, knows he can't wait for a factory fix. He now has the complete, ugly picture. Flaw 1. Running deep, fixed by setting depth to 0. Flaw 2. Magnetic exploder, prematurely detonating. Flaw 3. Contact exploder, crumpling on 90-degree hits. The Mark 14 wasn't a weapon. It was a trifecta of failure. On September 23, 1943, Admiral Lockwood makes a decision that arguably changes the course of the Pacific War. He sends a blunt, near insubordinate dispatch to all his submarine commanders. The order is simple: disable the Mark 6 magnetic exploder, effective immediately. His own crews are ordered to perform field surgery. Machinists and torpedomen, using wrenches and screwdrivers, physically pry open their torpedoes and disconnect the magnetic influence feature, turning their wonder weapon into a simple, old-fashioned contact torpedo. But that still leaves the faulty contact pin. Mommsen's team, working in the machine shops at Pearl Harbor, scrambles for a solution. They can't wait for new parts from the States. They need a fix now. They discover that the firing pin is too heavy and made of the wrong kind of steel. They start milling new, lighter pins from tougher metal alloys. In Australia, mechanics at the forward bases, desperate for parts, reportedly start raiding captured Japanese equipment, using high-grade steel from salvaged propeller shafts to build new, stronger firing pins. They are, quite literally, forging their own weapons in the field. By late 1943, nearly 2 full years after Pearl Harbor, the American submarine fleet is finally going to war with a torpedo that works. It's a modified, stripped-down, jury-rigged weapon, born of frustration and defiance. The laughter from the Japanese merchant ships is about to die in their throats. February 17, 1944. The sea lanes off Truk Lagoon. The conning tower of the USS Tang is slick with salt spray. On the open bridge, Commander Richard Dick O'Kane, protege of the legendary Mush Morton, wipes the stinging spray from his eyes. It's pitch black, and he's doing the unthinkable, hunting in the middle of a Japanese convoy, on the surface, at night. For 2 years, this was suicidal. But O'Kane isn't just a brave commander, he's an angry one. And tonight, he has a full load of 24 Mark 14 torpedoes, the new Mark 14 seconds. Torpedoes with their magnetic exploders surgically disconnected by his own men and with new, hardened steel contact pins fresh from the machine shops at Pearl Harbor. A lookout screams, "Target! Starboard bow! Large transport!" O'Kane doesn't bother with the periscope. He sights the 6,000-ton Gyoten Maru with his naked eye. "Stand by tubes 1 and 2. The Tang shudders as it lines up the shot. O'Kane is just 1,000 yards away. Fire 1, fire 2. The crew doesn't wait for the clang. They don't brace for the disappointment. They brace for the impact. 40 seconds later, 2 columns of white fire erupt from the Gyoten Maru's hull. The sounder deep, tearing K-wump, rolls across the water, a sound so violent it feels like a physical punch. The transport, loaded with troops, is broken in 2. It sinks in less than 3 minutes. Before the Japanese escorts can even react, O'Kane has his bow on another target, a tanker. Fire 3. Another high-speed run. Another perfect hit. Another catastrophic explosion. This is not a hunt. This is a massacre. This is what the Mark 14 was supposed to do all along. All across the vast Pacific, this same scene is being repeated. The silent service, once mocked and humiliated, has been unleashed. The field expedient fixes ordered by Admiral Lockwood have transformed the American submarine force from a frustrated scouting fleet into the single most effective weapon in the entire U.S. arsenal. The Japanese merchant fleet, the Marusa, the lifeblood of the empire. They are the arteries carrying the oil from the Dutch East Indies, the rubber from Malaya, and the rice from Burma back to the Japanese home islands. Without them, the imperial war machine grinds to a halt. And now, those arteries are being severed, one by one, in a relentless, brutal campaign of annihilation. The Japanese Navy, which had laughed at the American duds, is now facing a terrifying new reality. Their merchant crews, who once stood on deck to watch the harmless fish go by, are now so terrified that they often abandon ship at the first sign of a torpedo track before it even hits. The numbers are staggering. In one teacher, prefix 1942, during the Dud crisis, the entire U.S. subfleet sank just over 1 million tons of Japanese shipping. In 1943, as Lockwood's fixes began to take hold, that number jumped to 1.9 million tons. But in 1944, with the torpedoes finally working at 100% capacity, the U.S. submarine force sank a mind-boggling 4.9 million tons of Japanese shipping. They are sinking tankers, freighters, and troop transports faster than Japan can build them. The legendary Skipper's O'Kane on the Tang, Mush Morton on the Wahoo before his loss, Sam Dealey on the Harder, Eugene Fluckey on the Barbar, racking up tonnage at a rate that naval historians will one day study in awe. They are no longer bad shots. They are titans, wielding a weapon that is finally as sharp as their courage. But the victory is soaked in a bitter, tragic irony. The Bureau of Ordnance, the cabal of admirals in Washington, D.C., still refuses to admit they were wrong. They fight Lockwood's field fixes tooth and nail. They still insist their magnetic exploder is a work of genius, and that the contact pin is fine. They even order Lockwood to stop disabling the magnetic exploders. Lockwood, in one of the most famous and insubordinate messages of the war, replies, "I will continue to have the magnetic exploders disabled by my own forces until the Bureau of Ordnance can provide one that will hit and explode, and not just bore a hole in the water." The war for the Mark 14 is over. The war against Japan is now being won from beneath the waves. The Japanese Empire is being starved, strangled, and bled dry, all because a handful of frustrated, defiant submariners took a perfect weapon, broke it, and fixed it themselves. Late 1944, the South China Sea. For a Japanese merchant captain, the sea is no longer a highway. It is a graveyard. You are the master of the Arisan Maru, a rust-streaked freighter. Your hull is packed not with oil or rubber, but with 7,000 tons of raw, unprocessed sugar from the Philippines. It is a cargo of desperation. Your real cargo is below decks, in the suffocating darkness of the cargo hold. 1,800 American prisoners of war, survivors of Bataan, packed so tightly they cannot sit down. You are one of Japan's hell ships, and you are sailing alone, without an escort. There are none to spare. The lookouts in your rigging are not trained sailors. They are terrified conscripts, scanning the horizon for the one thing they fear more than death, the tiny, white feather of a periscope. They call the American submarines Oni demons. They are right to be afraid. Miles away, submerged in the blue-black depths, the USS Shark has been tracking you. Her skipper has no idea you are carrying prisoners. He sees only a 7,000-ton Maru, a vital statistic for the Empire's dwindling reserves. His torpedomen have loaded their fish. These torpedoes bear the scars of their own evolution. The Mark 6 magnetic exploder is gone, a useless tangle of wires in a spare parts bin back in Pearl Harbor. The contact firing pin is a new, gleaming piece of hardened alloy, milled in a submarine tender's workshop. When the Shark fires, there is no clang, there is no harmless thud. There is only a blinding, world-ending detonation that tears the Arisan Maru in half. This is the endgame, the U.S. submarine force, once the laughingstock of the Japanese Navy, has become the most lethal instrument of naval warfare in human history. By VJ Day in 1945, the silent service will have sunk over 1,300 Japanese merchant ships and more than 200 warships, including a battleship, 8 aircraft carriers, and 11 cruisers. In total, they destroyed over 5.3 million tons of shipping. They strangled the Japanese Empire. The factories in Osaka and Yokohama went silent, starved of oil and iron. The Imperial Japanese Navy fleet that had mocked Freddie Warder's Dudswas eventually reduced to a hollow force, its carriers anchored and useless, its battleships sitting in harbour with empty fuel tanks, waiting for the inevitable air raids. It was a victory achieved not by admirals in Washington, but by the grit of men like Lockwood, Mommsen, and Daspit. It was a victory paid for by the crews who, for 2 long, agonizing years, had to fight a war with a weapon that betrayed them at every turn. They were the ones who endured the pounding of depth charges after a perfect attack failed, who had to listen to the laughter of their enemies. The fatal flaw of the Mark 14 wasn't just in its depth controls or its firing pins. It was in the arrogance of the men who designed it, the belief that their theory was superior to the brutal reality of combat. The Japanese Navy laughed at the American Torpedo, but in the end, it was the stubborn, field grease-covered, rule-breaking submariners of the U.S. Navy who delivered the final, devastating punchline.